Past few days, one name has dominated the national conversation, the Cockroach Janta Party. And from marathon negotiations with the government and the Supreme Court's intervention today to Parliament debating sweeping anti-paper leak reforms, the movement has now shifted from the streets to the center of India's political discourse. Tonight, we speak exclusively to the man who has been at the heart of those negotiations, Cockroach Janta Party Chief Spokesperson Saurav Das. Many thanks, Saurav, for taking out the time. First and foremost, last night has been a marathon of negotiations with the government voices, with the government representatives. Take us through what happened in the last 13 to 14 hours and where does the current negotiation bull stand?
So last evening, we held a press conference after we had apprehensions that the government may not come good on the guarantees that it had given us and before the entire nation at that press conference, because there were reports from Bihar and other states of protesters being detained and arrested and not being let go of FIRs being pursued. So we saw that as a direct breach of public trust. And therefore, we held that press conference and we announced that if the government does not adhere to the guarantees by the deadline, which is today, then we will have to resume our protest. We'll give a big call for another round of protests in Delhi. Post that, after a few hours, the government representatives reached out and they wanted to meet. So me and Ratna Singh, the other spokesperson, went and met both the government representatives. At the meeting, they showed us notifications. We were finalizing the language of how this written guarantee will come. And we saw the Bihar government and the Assam government also coming out with those notifications late at night.
That's right.
We were working on the notifications for other states and central agencies the central government would give, and the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi would give for the Delhi police. So all of that was being worked out. And I'm sure that by today, the government would come good on the guarantees of no FIRs and no future action against any of these protesters.
Only time will tell whether the government comes through with those guarantees and those, assurances. I will come to that trust deficit in just a bit. But to talk about the Supreme Court's interim order, they've asked, it's a huge relief for the students and the young protesters, first and foremost. They've also asked for preservation of all the digital evidence, the body cam footage, the CCTVs, the drone footage. And, the Delhi police has its own task cut out for them because they must now distinguish between the peaceful protesters versus police action versus the mischievous element. So the Cockroach Janta Party's viewpoint and assessment on that.
See, we've been very clear. We are thankful for the Supreme Court for doing this. Thank you to them for waking up after so long. However, the guarantees that were given by the government of India is what has to be stuck by. That was guaranteed before the entire nation, and I'm sure the government would want to honor it. Whatever the Supreme Court does, whatever be its order, that is over and above what the guarantees were given to the protesters. So we have been very clear with our demand that all protesters have to be, released if they are in detention or arrested, and that no FIRs have to be will be filed against them in the future, and any existing FIRs against them have to be withdrawn. And that's very clear, and that's the guarantee that we have gotten. The Supreme Court now comes in and says that everybody should be released except those who have criminal antecedents. Now, we would like to ask the police, why are, for instance, history sheeters, people with criminal antecedents out on the streets? Why did they make way to these protests? And if that is the case, then one of the conditions that a court usually imposes when granting a bail is that they would not commit any further crime, right? If they have created some violence in these protests, then the police is of course free to go back to those courts in those cases and ask for cancellation of their bail. They are very free to do that. We cannot stop them from doing that. However, we have to be very wary of allowing any space for the police to distinguish between peaceful and non-peaceful protesters. And therefore, we are very clear that whosoever was present at the protest site and during these protests they will not be prosecuted, they will not be acted against, and there shall be no FIR against any of them. If there were criminals, the police can go back to the courts in those other cases and get their bail cancelled. We are no one to comment on that. But as far as our protests go, there will be no FIRs and there will be no future action against them.
But where does that stand at this point in time? Because I remember when you were sharing the stage with the union ministers, Dr. Jitendra Singh and the health minister JP Nadda, that press conference that took place, you said you were calling off the agitation because of the government's assurances, and one of those main assurance was the withdrawal of the FIRs. And you just told us that the Assam government and the Bihar government have come through with that, with those particular notifications. But what does one essentially say about the trust deficit? A lot of people online calling out the trust deficit between the government's assurances and the promises and what the CJP actually set out to do. The FIR flashpoint was the first one in many of those. Do you think more flashpoints are coming this negotiations way?
See, we don't bother ourselves from about people commenting various things, because everybody has an opinion and they're free to voice it out also. We were on the ground from day one. Even yesterday, the government representatives met us at 10 p.m. And the meeting went on till 1 a.m. We were finalizing on the language on how to best protect all the protesters. So we've been doing our job and we'll continue doing that. We can't be bothered by any false kind of criticism that we might be getting online. However, I hope there are no further flashpoints with the government, because assurances have been made, and they have to honor the word that they gave before this entire nation, because they were just not two ministers, but they were speaking on behalf of the government of India, and I'm sure government of India's words hold
Okay,
some meaning.
okay. We're talking about ministers, Saurabh, a lot of people, they have their own opinion about how Dharmendra Pradhan, the erstwhile education minister, was welcomed, in the parliament. Some of those visuals that went viral as well. Some people speaking in support of that, some people speaking against it. How do you view Dharmendra Pradhan's, welcome and reception at the parliament? What do you have to say for that?
See, I feel that the BJP has this habit, or at least the BJP supporters have this habit of garlanding people who are accused of heinous crimes, of people who've been sent to jail for committing some kind of violence or the other. And in that same spirit, I think the BJP MPs also, the manner in which they greeted and gave Dharmendra Pradhan a hero's welcome for God knows what reason. I mean, under that man, we had more than 20 plus students taking their own lives because of his incompetence only this year, right? So I don't know why they had to give that kind of winner's greeting to him when he arrived at the parliament. It does not augur well for democracy. It does not show the government in good light at all. I don't know. I think the BJP government has completely lost the plot. I don't know how they're going to gain public's trust. But I mean, what more can one say? Dharmendra Pradhan has to be held accountable, not just in the manner that he has already been held accountable by the Gen Z of this country, but also internally. There has to be, some standards that the BJP has to set for its own ministers and MPs. Because if it goes on this way, then I'm sure that people are going to be more and more disappointed by the entire BJP party.
Well, talking about internal accountability that you just highlighted here, Saurav, just a couple of more questions. Talking about that 5-point charter of reforms that was submitted, to the government in those closed room conversations, would you like to help the viewers understand exactly what those 5 points are in terms of reforms, even as the Parliament is witnessing a showdown on that anti-paper leak bill?
See, one of those demands was that the 2024 law against paper mafia, the jail time be increased from 3 years to 10 years. That demand, I think, has already been accepted. There are other demands like vendor transparency, because some of these vendors who conduct these exams, they are sometimes blacklisted and then they go back to some other state, change their name, but it's essentially the same persons owning those business who then change their names and get a new contract, and the again the same paper leaks happen. So we want vendor transparency to also come in. The NTA has to be reformed. It has to be changed. It has to be thrown out, and a national testing commission has to be put in place, which will be a statutory body, and is amenable to the RTI Act and has to work transparently. There has to be student compensation for any kind of paper leaks. Students have put in so much money and hard work over the years. Their families, put all of their life savings to get their children educated, and then a paper leak happens and they have to bear so much trauma. I think there needs to be some compensation for the students as well, and a student charter which would inspire confidence in the young of this country. I think some of these demands need to be met. The government has guaranteed that it will study these demands, and after a month's time, will invite a CJP delegation to take this forward. We are
In the
looking
meantime,
forward to that as well.
in the meantime, Saurabh, there is the anti-paper leak bill, which has been tabled. Discussion is already underway on that particular bill. Some of the contours of that bill is also in public domain. We'll flash some of those graphics also on our screens. But the contours of some of those reforms, you've got subsection 1 of section 10 that has increased the prison time. The fine and stricter punishment has been increased. When you talk about speedy justice, special fast-track courts in section 12 with a stipulated timeline of 2 months and 60 days has been brought to the fore. Organized crime syndicates and mafias, the fine goes up to 10 crore rupees. And it also talks about top bosses, senior managements and directors, that we need to create a deterrent that is actually enough. So, do you think the government is doing enough with the outreach, the Prime Minister's Instagram reel, the task force? Your assessment on that particular front?
I'm happy that the government is responding finally after letting the young of this country be on the streets for more than 36 days. I think finally that the government is responding is good for the nation. It sends a good message to the young of this country that the government is listening to them finally. It should have happened much sooner, but now that it is happening, we are very happy about it. We'll study the law that they have brought in a more detail
All right.
and come out with our own comments. However, I feel that more such outreach, more such engagement on a daily basis should happen, not just in response to mass protests.
Coming back to those mass protests, that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. There are allegations of the use of brute force. Rahul Gandhi, the leader of opposition, also exhibited a particular case study of that young man who was injured because of the pellet firing, alleged use of the pellet gun as well. What do you have to say about that? Because you see, Cockroach Janta Party was also given the credibility of this huge mammoth of a protest that we saw, certainly historic in its own sense, but the use of brute force and of course the alleged use of the pellet gun as well.
See, things like pellet guns should not be used at all. These are all civilians. These are not terrorists roaming on the streets. Young people from across the country had come to Jantar Mantar, especially for that Chalo Sansad March. Forget pellet gun, even that kind of brute force that was used by the police was wrong, should not have been done. The DCP who ordered the use of pellet gun should be held accountable, must be made to resign from the force, because such a DCP is a threat to the society and will not do any safety, security, law and order, for the citizens of this country. I think we need to ban use of pellet guns for civilian protests.
All right.
Everybody has a right to protest. This message needs to sink into the bureaucracy, into the police force, because these methods were adopted by the British. They don't have any place in independent India.
Shifting our focus to independent India here, Saurabh, you see, I know that you and Ashutosh and all the spokespersons of the Cockroach Janta Party have been answering this question very diplomatically, very smartly. The future of this outfit, many people are interested in what the Cockroach Janta Party is going to be, what kind of electoral impact will come through. Is there going to be any electoral impact? What next? The roadmap ahead for the Cockroach Janta Party. Would you like to throw some light on that?
See, we've been very clear from day one that this protest is about education sector, and the immediate trigger was need paper leak. However, the movement is about youth, and we will continue raising youth-centric issues. We will be going, we'll be touring the entire nation. We'll be going to the villages, to the towns, to as many as possible. We'll be hearing people out, because my personal learning from this protest has been that people don't have anyone to share their stories with, because people they elect to power do not give a damn about them. And I think we can be those ears. We'll go to them, we'll talk to them, we'll come out with an agenda for the young of this country very soon.
You know, my final question to you, Saurav, before I let you go, I know you're a busy man these days. Um, they say the taste of revolution lingers on for quite some time. So, you know, considering you as somebody who is focusing on your own career, I must ask you to help the viewers also understand what next for Saurav Das here.
See, I feel, of course, I want to keep writing because writing is something that I don't want to leave. But at the same time, I realize that the responsibility that we have now is much bigger. So I want to continue, raising the issues just with a larger medium now. And I've always been very vocal about social issues, about issues of the young, of our civil society, just about empowering people at the grassroots. I think now I've just found a bigger medium, larger medium, and a more credible medium after the protests to, create meaningful change. So I will continue doing that.
Well, many thanks for speaking to us here on News 9. Saurav, you've been the face of this movement. You've been the voice of this movement. Many thanks for taking the time, and we hope that we get to speak to you very, very soon.